Farmers are the original stewards because of the conservation we do and the resiliency and the sustainability that we have. We are the stewards of the land, and we'll continue to do that till we die.
Conservation means future. When you conserve something, it means it's going to be there for the future generations. And so anytime that you can take those steps with your farm to be a conservationist, that means your farm's going to be there in the future. So it's important, it's necessary to do that. And some of the ways that we do that, again, is minimizing tillage where we can. It's providing our crops and soil with the right nutrients that it needs, and overall just taking care of it.
You know, each and every day is I guess you need to be a steward of the land. Every action you make is going to affect that soil, is going to affect that land that you're going to be passing on down to that next generation. So, you know, in the back of your head, you're always thinking, you know, how can I improve what I've already done this past year? Can I improve on that? And so those are conversations we have, you know, during the winter time. You know, what can we do a little bit different? You know, do we need to mow the stubble? Well, maybe not. Maybe we can just harrow it. You know, can we change the point on the cultivator? Maybe it's not going to knock down as much stubble. How do we get the drills through this stubble that we've got out there? And we've kind of gone through that over the last few years, and just trying to leave more of that on top. Those are kind of some of the things in the back of your head each year. You know, how can we improve what we've already done? And so I think every farmer does that. You know, how can we make things a little bit better, and how can we get, you know, the next generation onto the farm?
So as you can see in some of the background of this video, there is some older pieces of farm equipment. And at one point, all of these tractors were used on this farm. You know, the first big thing, the transition from my great grandfather would have been horses to tractors. And then after tractors, it became bigger tractors with cabs. And as we transitioned in the last few decades to tractors with precision agriculture on it, with GPS. And some of the things we've really learned is we've become more accurate with our seed placement, we've become more accurate with our trips across the field, fuel savings, cost of labor production savings. And as we continue to use these tools and learn how to better manage our time and our resources, we've really seen a benefit to our production of our farm.
Technology has been a huge improvement for us with GPS and what we can do just in terms of minimizing overlap, if nothing else. We're just so much more accurate, putting the inputs that we need where we need it and not putting it where we don't need it. That's using a yield mapping technology in the combine. We've now, for how many years we've been doing that, 15, 16 years, we've built up a database of yield maps for every field that we can average and come up with a really good picture of what the capabilities are for different areas of the field, and then manage those areas for what their potential is, as opposed to trying to treat the whole field the same way. And I think that's allowed us to raise better crops. We're not putting too many resources where we don't have the capability to handle it, and we're putting adequate where it has more capabilities. And you know, our yields have improved quite a bit. Our test weights are up. We're just raising a better crop.
Probably the biggest change has probably been the advent of GPS back in the late 90s, early 2000s. You know, reducing our overlap. I still remember the first day we tried that on our farm, and I couldn't believe it worked. It sold me that, that first time we took that tractor up the canyon and saw that the overlap was reduced by, basically we were going from 15 to 20% overlap down to 2 to 3%. I bought it that day. So that was probably been the biggest advent I think we've seen since I've been farming the last 25 years. Just by doing that, it's not only reduced our input costs, but it's also reduced, how much is actually going on the ground. The satellite imagery using the variable rate technology, that's been a big advent. Being able to, micromanage different areas of the farm, different areas of actually field. to produce, you know, the same amount of wheat, but maybe with less inputs. You know, and growing maybe a little bit more wheat on the, you know, the wetter parts of the field. So that's been a nice addition to the farm too.
One of the sustainable practices that we do on an annual basis is soil testing. So before we get ready to plant in the fall, and we kind of think Halloween to 4th of July, that's usually our crop rotation system. So before we get ready to plant, one of the things that we'll do is we'll take a lot of soil tests and samples from various places of the farm, and we'll send them off for testing. So we're establishing how far down our moisture level goes, what is our nitrogen level, so that we can adjust and plan for the amount of inputs that we might need when we go ahead and put that seed in the ground. And not only is it good for our soil and our soil health and our sustainability for the farming operation, but it's really good for the inputs that we have in terms of a cost standpoint. We don't want to spend or do or add more than we absolutely have to, because again, this is an environment in which we live too. I want to prepare and pass this on to the next generation in a better state. I need to make sure that I'm doing the very best that I can, and we're paying attention to what has to happen, and we're doing the test to make sure that we are doing it correctly.
So part of caring for the land is making sure that it's safe as well. And so, you know, my house sits in the middle of our fields. And so if I put something in our fields that's gonna harm me or my nieces and nephews or my family, I'm not gonna do that. And so having, caring for myself means caring for the fields and the crops in the right way. And so by being gentle and caring, your crops will do better and the community will thrive as well.
When we think about what we can do on a rotational basis up here where we're living in this microclimate kind of an area, when we're limited on rainfall, we have a very specific soil type, we rely very heavily on the wheat breeders, the development of wheat breeds and trials and things like that, and creating opportunities for farmers like us to make a decision on what we're going to plant in hopes that we are able to plant something that's going to be supported by the market.
I do sit on the liaison committee for both the Pendleton and the Morrow station. Wheat industry support of research at those stations and support for those stations in general has been super important. To have, you know, just because our environment here in the Pacific Northwest is fairly unique, you know, to have local research being done in a rainfall environment, you know, the Morrow station's not very far away from here, you know, and the Pendleton resource, soil resource is pretty similar too, even though they get more rainfall. But to have a group of scientists working in our environment trying to address our production issues is super important. And you know, my push has always been to make sure we're studying the cause of the problem as opposed to treating symptoms.
Well, sustainability to me is a mix of heritage and technology. 50 years ago, farms were sustainable because they knew the soil was their bank. And so they used the available technology to grow crops and save the soil. And be farmed differently, such as no-till or minimum till. And I like to think that a farm will decide how they farm based on their soil type, whether they run cattle, their weeds, weed resistance, and that kind of thing. That's kind of the way sustainability to me is it's based on your operation, and the soil is what makes you money. So you work your farm in order to sustain it and regenerate it over years.
Conservation means legacy. The next legacy, the next kids, the grandkids will have the acres will be better shape. We have to keep this soil for the next generation and generations and hundreds of years and multiple generations down the road. The soil has to be in good shape.
I would say conservation is just very simple for me. We want to do more with less. We want to save, and that can go to save money, that can save time, that can save fuel, that can save inputs. And we want to be stewards of the land. The land is what puts food on our table. And we want to do the best we can to grow a safe and healthy crop. And any way we can do that to save these inputs, we're going to do it. And we want to make sure that we have this land to pass on or to continue to grow crops for you as long as we're in business.
My grandfather, who was a longtime farmer, always said that we were caretakers and guardians of the land. Our job was to preserve it and pass it on to the next generation in a better state. And so we are working together to do the very best that we can to do that for the next generations.